Bitcoin is repeating this again. We saw this in 2024. I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about. We're going to jump right into it because there's no time to waste. Because we already know tariffs are on fire, basically, right? There's a tariff war. We already know that jobs reports are declining over time. That's looking good for future rate cuts, right? And we all know that CPI came in slightly less than expected, which is also in favor for us that are buying these growth assets to the long side, right? To the upside. So I'm going to jump straight into it. This is what Bitcoin is doing again. And I'm noticing this at a really interesting time. I'm going to show you guys what I mean. So you guys remember, I said this a lot in previous videos. You guys remember in 2024 when Bitcoin was in this long-term sideways consolidation that lasted months. Within this time, we still had more Bitcoin adoption happening, even though retail and there's a lot of fear in the market due to, at that point, was increasing interest rates, right? But there was also a little bit of recession fear during this time too. We're seeing that right now. But during this time, there was a lot of fear, and we were in this long-term sideways consolidation. But during this time, we saw this right here. We saw this right here. So you guys see this inverse head and shoulders. So you can kind of see it, right? Where we have this deep value supportive area, right? Where Bitcoin fell into it 3 times. The first time and the third time ended up being higher than the middle one. And if we look at the current structure, actually, it's very, very interesting. And I'm going to show you guys it on a different chart. There's a lot of notes I have on there. But if you look at what we're going through now, we know that Bitcoin is in a lot of fear right now. There's recession fears, but there's still a lot of Bitcoin adoption happening. There's more states, more governments. You guys already seen the news. I don't have to show you. There's a lot more Bitcoin adoption happening at a larger volume, but there's still a lot of fear due to same thing like in 2024 macroeconomic reasons. But during this time, we're seeing something very, very similar, where Bitcoin falls into where right now ever since the top of Bitcoin down to the bottom that we've seen recently, it's down 30%. Previously in 2024, it felt like 33%, but we're pretty much there, just about the same thing, and we're seeing super discounted, prices during a sideways consolidation, which so far has lasted a few months. Not as long, but this is what I'm trying to say, right? We're seeing something similar happening right here. So if you guys look at this pattern here, I'm going to show you guys on a different chart as well. But we have that dip, then the rise. We have a more significant dip, potentially the head of a similar pattern of that inverse head and shoulders. So if things sort of lighten up a little bit, which is sort of expected, we have a lot of fear. Sometimes there's brief moments of light where prices go up a decent amount, like we saw here, and then it dips hard. Like we had just positive. I don't know where negative news just disappeared. We had a ton of positive news, and then negative news again. So we could be seeing something like that again, where we see positive news, just a lot of short-term bullishness, and then out of nowhere negative news happens before we see another pump up once again. But if things happen in a similar pattern, I'm going to show you guys what I mean right now, because if we see this happen again, just like in 2024, I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you guys that chart one more time, actually. So remember this time, right? Remember this time, we were, it was super negative, large run up. We just saw that run up. I'm going to show you guys again one more time. And then a big dip due to fear, and then a big run up. After this big run up, once again, we had fear. We had, no one remembers this time in 2024. I held during this time. I don't even remember it, to be honest. But we had a similar thing happen, and then I don't know where we came back down, retested deep value, but higher than the second dip, and then from there, that's when we started forming a new bullish structure that led us up very aggressively all the way up to 100K. So are we repeating that again? It's very, very possible, and it's something I'm trying to keep an eye on, because we already know that Bitcoin is in deep discounted levels. It's super discounted. It's well underneath 90K, well underneath 100K. And we had the CME gap being tested, and then we had it fully tested and held quite strongly before running up. So is this the second dip of a larger picture head and inverse head and shoulders pattern that we've seen previously? Because we already know that a lot of the deep value Bitcoin has been bought up. We know that deep value Bitcoin has been bought up and is being hodled by large institutions, governments, and so on, right? And whales that are buying during this dip because they all know, and a lot of retail should know, even though there's a lot of fear, that a lot of this macroeconomic fear is temporary. It's not like tariffs are going to last forever. They're not going to last the whole year. This is a negotiation thing between countries, and then on top of that, it's like we just have recession fears. Nothing has been confirmed, but soon enough, things will lighten up because again, these tariffs can go on for a very long time. It's a back and forth kind of thing, and then it ends up fading away. And next thing you know, we're up in higher prices, and everyone forgets about all the stuff that we're going through right now. We repeat this so many times, but the question is though, and it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of unfold because we know that we have a little bit of a bullish structure forming that can bring us up, further and further up into the 80K before we find strong resistance. And that's also, there's a lot of liquidity walls forming in that high 80K area. But we can be seeing something similar, right? Because look, we have a lot of bearishness due to fear and then a quick recovery up. And then we saw another big dip because of fear, lower than that previous dip, and now we can be going up. Soon enough, as things seem to be getting somewhat better, we can find resistance somewhere in the high 80s, possibly even in the 90s, but most likely in the 80s before we see another dip. And then this dip can lead us up much higher. But the question is, this is where time will tell. But it's something to really keep an eye on because this is very similar to 2024, like in a scary way how similar it is. We already know that a CME gap is super discounted Bitcoin, and we know that discounted Bitcoin, most of us have been bought up. That's why due to really no positive news, we see the price come down to that super discounted area below 80K. And then it quickly recovers. During this time, we really didn't have any positive news, but instead Bitcoin kept going up. Yes, I know CPI came out to be pretty good today, and we have a Fed meeting next week, so it's going to be very interesting how that unfolds, knowing that also jobs are kind of declining on a downward trend. But we can see something like that happen where, there's some positivity lingering around, and then some more negative news happen. This can be either jobs, it can be maybe the Fed, or it can be more aggressive tariffs, or something happens that could cause us to come back down. And then that dip, the question is that dip going to be above the 76, 70K Bitcoin range, above it before we go up higher? So it can repeat very, very similarly. So again, this is the pattern I'm kind of keeping an eye on to see how we go, because right now we pumped up and now we're sort of like in this consolidation phase before another pump up potentially, and then we can come back down, retest deep value but higher than the previous dip, and then that's when we start forming a new uptrend pattern. And we all know that if things were really as we know things are bad, but for some reason we're not really making more aggressive dips, because we could have easily been holding 70K, and I just thought we could have easily been not just holding 70K but trending more towards the low 70K. So I'm not saying we can go there. I'm still saying like it's very possible that what can hit the fan, and then we can easily drop down to here. But until we break below and hold underneath this CME gap, I'm gonna go ahead and say that we're trying to consolidate around that bottom. And as of right now, I am expecting Bitcoin, and we're seeing that right now, where Bitcoin is sort of pumping up a little bit more. We can easily see this progress a bit more before something causes us to drop. And then the question is that drop going to be above the previous low, which can be a bigger picture, taking away all the short-term noise, a little bit of a bigger picture, kind of like, uptrend forming, just like we saw in 2024, that can eventually lead us higher, finally back into the 90s and back to 100K. That's the big question, and I'm gonna keep an eye on the chart. I'm gonna update you guys on this because I'm expecting, it's fair to say Bitcoin is trying to trend higher. We saw it break past the the retracement area in blue, which created enough momentum. We're actually holding above the 120 moving average. So there's definitely enough momentum to bring us a little bit higher. But I am expecting it to fall back down. It's going to be very, very similar. There's a lot of volatility right now, and there's a lot of fear. It's just that right now, Bitcoin is holding a little bit strong before we see another significant dip. And there's a good chance. There's a good chance, depending how there's a lot of background buying going on in Bitcoin, and this can create that higher low from here, creating that more bigger picture inverse head and shoulders before we pump up higher. So yeah, I'm gonna keep you guys updated on this, and it's looking very interesting. I want to see if this plays out or not. But regardless, I'm expecting Bitcoin to go much higher throughout this year. But we need to wait for this short-term, fluctuation to play out, consolidate enough before we can build up enough bullish momentum. And we'll see what happens in the macroeconomic throughout the rest of March, because this is a very interesting month for sure. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys soon.